Hello, so this video will be a guide for returning players to understand or do a little recap of the mechanics and the newer mechanics that have introduced. Also, it will be very good for newer players to understand the final points of the game. It will take me hours to explain everything, so probably everything I explain in the video would probably need another short explanation or a longer explanation. So yeah, we'll cover 10 aspects that are very important to the game, which is 1. Factions, 2. The Hexarchy, 3. Tetsclan, 4. Technology levels and the chips for every faction, so we'll do a faction overview. 5. Ship tech tree, most important upgrades, the clones and the classes and their combinations, the medical system, the ship storage, chips and crafting, and then augments and implants. So 10 points we'll cover, and I'll try to spend a lot less time on them than it should be needed. So if you have any questions, just ask in the comment section. So factions, what are the factions? When you start the game, you'll see factions that will be either your employer, your ally, or your enemy. Now, I really recommend you pick a few factions to side with in the beginning of the game instead of just doing missions wherever you find them, because whatever you do in the game is actually affecting the power, the tech level, and basically it's affecting the other factions. So choose a few of them. By the way, subscribing or unsubscribing doesn't do anything. It just highlights the faction you want to work with, or maybe highlights the enemy. So choose around 5 in the beginning, because there actually will be a lot of modifiers that will apply to the factions as you play more of the game, and you want a balanced game. That's the whole point. Over here, a faction will have these stats, faction assets, meaning this one has 13 assets. Assets are basically the bases it has. It can be on a moon, it can be on Earth, it can be anywhere. They have 13 assets that produce power and tech level. What is faction power? Faction power determines how successful they are in a mission. So for example, if let's say Realware with 759 attacks a corporation with, let's say, 1000 power, they will have a lower chance of actually succeeding in their mission against them. But that's not the only thing it does. It also determines the amount of enemies in a mission. So if you fight against Dilty, which has a faction power of 3000, I would say you'd face around 30 to 40 enemies per floor, but if you fight, let's say, SBN, I would say you fight around 10 or 15 enemies per floor, but the amount of enemies is also dependent on the mission type, on the number of skulls the mission has, and how much time has passed in the game, in game time. Yeah, they're the evil guys, as you can see. And the idea is that you are supposed to have kind of like a number that helps you determine how many enemies you'll fight. So if you fight a faction with a lot of faction power, expect a lot of enemies. So top power faction, a lot of enemies. Also, this will all determine the amount of elite units or specialized unit the faction will have. So not all of the units will be soldiers. Some of them will just be scientists with big guns. Sometimes they'll just be very defensive with, for example, like soldiers with very good armor but not good weapons. Or sometimes there'll be robots or cyborgs or stuff like that. Or just very strong units overall. So the more faction power, the more enemies they have, and the more advanced their units are. Faction tech. Faction tech, again, you have two sides of the coin. One side is the technology they have available for you to trade with if you have enough faction standing. For example, my faction standing reputation relation is 20, which means I only have enough reputation to barter for tier technology tier 2 items. It means I need to get more reputation to get to their tech 3 items. Also, this means the technology they'll be using against you in missions. There are also a lot of neutral items which all factions will be using, but they'll mostly be using specialized items. Again, it's very hard to remember all of those stuff, but most of the units will just use the same weapons against you, plus a lot of them will have the scourges and the flashes. So that means a lot of energy weapons, and then the shock ones, the shock rifles against you, which means they are very, very dangerous. Tech levels like power go up and down. So if your faction loses enough tech points, if it's sabotaged, spied on, I don't know, ambushed, what is the other one? Espionage used against them and it succeeds, they will lose tech level, tech progress. Which means a faction might go from tech level 2 to tech level 1, or let's say SBN, which as you can see it's at like tech level 3, will go to tech level 2 if it continues to drop, to lose faction tech. It's a bit of a longer discussion because a faction has assets that produce power and tech, but based on how good they do in the missions, or how much you help them, or how much you attack them and help the other factions, they'll start losing faction power and faction tech points, which can be very bad. But here we just have to worry about credit when you do a mission for a faction, or if you trade with them and there are not enough items for you to get the full worth of credits, there'll be leftover credits, which means you can just go to the faction and barter basically for nothing. So if you do a lot of missions for a faction, kind of check if you want something from them anyway, even if you don't have the barter, because the credits will acquire anyway. And that's about it. Here you see all of their missions, defense, and active contracts. Active contracts can mean attacks, or look over here, espionage, which means they will lower the stats of other factions. Or over here, just this is conquest. This means they can actually capture an asset which is very, very bad. You will want to rush there and defend civil conquest. Otherwise, they might get another asset that will produce more stuff for them. And that's the basic thing of the factions. Technology levels are pretty self-explanatory, but we'll go over them a little later. Now the Hexarchy. Point 2. What is the Hexarchy? The Hexarchy, as you can see, is the collection of the 4 strongest corporations. Which means that this doesn't mean they will not fight against each other, but this means that the game will always be controlled by the 4 Hexarchy corporations, which means your game might devolve into the 4 corporations being so strong that they start destroying all of the other factions and you'll only be left fighting against them. Which is a shame because all of the factions have so many wonderful things and wonderful chips, or at least wait until you get their chips before you let a faction dominate. Look at all of the cool gear they might have. The problem is that if you let these guys capture too many assets, all of your missions will be against them. At some point you'll not even get a mission against the other factions because they might be permanently destroyed right now. That would be a shame. If they lose their headquarters, they just they are destroyed. They no longer exist in the game. So my opinion is that in your first games you help the Hexarchy because they have very good barter items and they're very strong to fight against. You don't want that. You can try to help the Hexarchy in your first playthrough, which should be about 20 to 30 hours, and then you fight against them to preserve the other corporations. Because as a side effect of this, the other corporations will be weakened by the Hexarchy and then Tetsclan will just go over and collect all of their assets, which means you'll mostly be fighting against the Hexarchy and Tetsclan. I had a game where I was basically so fed up fighting Encom. I was fighting Encom basically 80% of the time because they were just controlling the galaxy, and I was trying to capture the location back so the other factions would have something to progress with, but it just didn't work. So if you join the Hexarchy, join all 4 corporations and just control the galaxy very, very fast, but then you'll not really have a lot of missions left. They're kind of the evil guys. Now, point 3, Tetsclan. They're basically demons, but they have kind of like this annoying thing where they can spawn in missions. So for example, if you're fighting against Core Ward, you would be expecting to fight a certain amount of weapon, a certain amount of armor. You'll have a certain specialized gear for the specific enemy, but when Tetsclan starts appearing, they have poison stuff. They have very strong stuff at range, they have very high damage. It's a totally different enemy to fight. And like I said, they just expand non-stop. Sometimes the Hexarchy will stop Tetsclan from expanding, but most of the time Tetsclan will get a lot of other stuff from the other factions as well. So it's much better to fight against Tetsclan in a way, because they have the Gvak and this thing which will repair items. This thing will restore your character to perfect health. I think it's addictive as well. This is to reveal the map. But there is a big catch. So if you are going to fight against Tetsclan, you're not going to get items to upgrade your ship, you're not going to get good gear for your character, you're not going to get good gear for augmenting and implements. You're going to get a lot of items you're probably not going to use ever again. Same for Tilty. So if you want to get most of the items for your upgrades, because if you look at the specific of each corporation, you'll see that this is a mining corporation, so if this has a mission against, let's say, another station. Anyway, the idea is that you'll probably want to get all of the corporation chips, all of the faction chips, all of their rewards, all of their specific stuff in order to go and have a very smooth game. Because if Tetsclan has a station and you fight on the station, you'll be fighting Tetsclan units from the beginning of the game. And then when QuasiMorphosis rises, it just be a mess. It's basically the worst faction to fight against because of how boring they are. Also, you have to think of it this way. If you fight against them, they will only drop their poison ammo, and their armors have quite a lot of resistance against them, so it will be very hard to fight against them since you cannot use their weapons against them. So try to fight against Tetsclan from the beginning and try to get familiarized with their weapons and their playstyle, and at the same time try to fight against Dilty, because the weapons Dilty has, for example, will be very strong against Tetsclan. The weapons Ancom have be very good against them. Also, as a bonus, it's worth it to fight against the Hexarchy because they will have buffalo backpacks, for example, rear wear or other stuff. So this is the core element of the game. Fight Hexarchy, fight Tetsclan, or join Hexarchy to fight Tetsclan, or join the other corporations to fight Hexarchy and Tetsclan. Whatever you do, don't let them become allies, or they don't really have alliances because as you can see they don't have faction diplomacy yet, it's not in the game. But just so you know to prepare this for the future, since this is the grand strategy aspect of the game. You'll also see that certain factions will fight each other a lot more because you will have to look at, let's say, the system map. What is on Mars, for example? So on Mars, as you can see, you have a lot of Dilty, French Comte, and some other stuff. So this means basically the revolutionaries, what are they called again? The civil resistance was kind of kicked out of Mars. So when you have a situation like this, you will have to... This is the problem. So SBN, Realware, Dilty is already taking over this planet. So no other factions will be left over here. So when they work together like this, you kind of have to fight against them, otherwise you'll be left with very boring games. Now let's go to number 4. The technology level and the chips and what each faction has. So this will be a short presentation of each faction. You can also read a lot of info about them over here. Engineering, hyper corporations. So they're engineering, but they mostly use sonic pistols which do blunt damage, but also these things which do shock damage. Now, there are not a lot of weapons in the game that do shock damage, but that also means there are not a lot of armors that are good against shock damage. So, Dilty right now is probably the most annoying corporation to fight because their basic units might have laser weapons, which are deal radiation damage or beam damage and radiation sickness and radiation wounds. And then they can also have these ones which will deal shock damage and stuns, basically. And then they can have these ones which will deal blunt damage with a knockback chance. So very annoying to fight against. The amount of items they get will be very good, but later. And if you ally with them, as you can see, they will not have an armor set until much later into the tech tree. And their later weapons might not be so fun as the other factions. Which of Revelation. Religious organizations that focuses on shotguns and alcohol in the beginning. Also notice how certain factions are much better to trade with in the beginning. For mine chips and class chips, Dilty is great in the beginning, but later not so much, and for basic item chips and alcohol, this faction is better. So as you can see, they have the Jeff hammers and the other shotguns. Their armors are not very good against piercing, but they have the other stats, resistances. Good against beam, so that means the Church of Revelation gear is good against Dilty. Shotguns, energy shotguns. Not sure what these things are, but probably just a normal pistol. This is a good shotgun. And then they have one of the coolest looking armor sets in the game. Has the ultimate shotgun, which is just, I think, a normal shotgun with the beefed up stats, which will be a beast. Ancom. Publisher Research Corporation. Yeah, Ancom is very annoying because it has very bad gear in the beginning. They basically have parade armor that is used as armor. In the beginning they are very weak. These are just normal weapons, kinetic weapons. But once they kind of reach level 7, this is when they'll become super strong. So Ancom is kind of weak in the beginning, but this is I think this is an SMG, and I'm not sure what this is. This might be a rifle, this might be an SMG. But starting level 7, they get these super strong guns, which will be almost impossible to tank. But again, Encom is a Hexarchy that is the weakest Hexarchy member. Tetsclan, poison stuff, their armors don't really do much, very hard to fight. Again, I have spoken about Tetsclan, but you need a lot of poison resistance. I think this is just an item that gives you a little bit of health, permanent health for the mission only. But the problem is when they reach level 3, this is a shotgun. This is a rifle with 5 range that can fire 3 ammo per shot, which will make it almost impossible to tank that much damage. So if you get shot 2 times, you're almost dead all the time. Plus they have the melee weapons, plus they can have some very fast units. And their armor will become quite good, because as you can see, the only way to fight them is with piercing weapons. Because their armor is good against most attacks anyway. So it will be very hard to fight against them, it's not really worth it. So be very careful with them. Or if you ally with them, you'll get the poison weapons that basically none of the factions have a good resistance against, except 1 or 2 maybe. Planet Bridge, engineering and construction, so that's what you'd expect from them. This is a weapon, electromagnetic weapon, always yields the same amount of damage, piercing, and it doesn't need ammo, plus it's silenced. Silence is very important because nobody can hear you, well, almost nobody. We'll speak about this a later time. This is just a bigger version of this thing. Bigger version. This is armor, but as you can see they are very weak in the beginning, but you can barter for medkits and some other stuff. And later they just become kind of weak because they don't have anything until tier 6. And the other stuff is just boring normal stuff that you can get as neutral items. So I think Planet Bridge is probably the most overlooked faction in the game by the developers. They need to add more stuff to it. Forward is mining. Oh boy, they have some really fun stuff. They are not that good to barter with in the beginning. But you can get industrial tools. This is a flamer. I'm not sure what this... No, this is a nail gun, an improved nail gun. This is a flamer, and this is a disc thrower, improved versions. They are very strong. These are probably the weapons that would kill you a lot of times in the beginning, so I don't recommend you fight against them in the beginning without proper stuff. There is good armor. This is just a big laser, but they reduce the range of it, so it's not as good as it used to be, and armor. So they're super dangerous in the first part of the game, and then they're basically paper tigers. Not too strong. Religious corporation and publisher, so they are different from the Church of Revelation because they have a much weirder agenda, and they will use a lot of energy weapons which will annoy you a lot. They have very high-tech weapons, and at level 7 they get really dangerous things, then just their armors and their other weapons. Probably the strongest faction in the beginning of the game, because at tier 2 and at tier 3 they get these super strong pistols that have a high range. I mean, if you compare that with DLT, 22, 23, 32, much higher damage, much easier to use, and this is deadly. So very annoying to fight against once they get their laser weapons, but then it becomes a little easier since they don't get much until they get... I mean, this is an energy shotgun, and this is an energy sniper rifle. Very hard to fight against. This is also one of the factions that will fight against the Hexarchy with a lot of success as well, so keep an eye out on them. They can be super strong, hard to fight against. Grasshoppers are basically the cowboys. That's the best way I can describe it. In the Wild West. They just have normal ballistic weapons, not too bad, not too good. I'm not sure what this is, I never got it. Looks kind of cool. Also one of the weakest factions in the game, and they only get a cheaper level 10, so the developers really should look at the Grasshopper technology again, as you see. As you can see, Planet Bridge and Grasshopper will be the underdogs of most of the games. Daydream games, chemical and pharmaceuticals. Oh boy, these guys are really strong. The weapons in the beginning are not that good, but they can cause poison, which will probably kill most people if they're not careful. This is a cryogun, this is a divider. They're not as strong, but they have units that have 100 health in the beginning of the game. They're just experiments. So they might be able to outlast your damage and make you lose all of your resources if you're not careful. And then later they don't get much. This is a poison shotgun. At level 7 and 8 and beyond there, they'll become very dangerous. I think some of their units, depending on their power, their faction power, might have these items much sooner. I actually have them, so I can show you. The dividers a very strong pistol. It has 5 range and 60-34 damage. It's an energy weapon, which means it can crit and burn you. Super dangerous, probably the most dangerous laser pistol in the game because of the range. And this is the toxic shotgun. So now that I think about it, I think if a faction has enough power, or if, you know, they roll a dice, they can get a very good weapon that is above their tech level. Or maybe I just found it as a job, but I think I killed someone for it. So yeah, this amount of poison damage is almost impossible to block. Very annoying faction to fight against, but not as deadly as the ones I showed you, like the Sunlight Coven with their energy weapons. Sunlight, energy weapons, yeah? CV Resistance was one of the weakest factions before, but now it's actually been a decent spot. I mean, it's not like Core World with mostly building materials and weapons and stuff. Actually, it has pretty good guns, like this SMG over here, which fires a lot of bullets for range, so it's not really perfect, but the Impactor set is actually just elemental defense, but once they get to level 4, they start becoming a little more dangerous. This is the Bison, which is a real-life weapon, an SMG. And the improved Cutter. Then you have at level 5 this over here, which is kind of like a machine gun. And this is just an energy weapon, I forgot what it does, but probably shoots plasma or something. And the sniper rifle. The sniper rifle is pretty good. And then they get just big guns. So this is kind of, again, the game is a bit of a meme and Easter egg. So this is supposed to be like the red faction, like the game. So you'll get progressively much bigger guns. So if in the beginning they're basically worthless, they have worthless items, not much, a flame or a bunch of nonsense. Starting level 4 they start to get very good armor against physical attacks. At 5 they start getting super good weapons, at 6 decent weapon. But at 8, 9 and 10 they just get the best weapons in the game. Yeah, this is a BFG. I have a video where I fire it and I use it quite a lot, so if you want to see how this is, just check out that video. It's really impressive and deadly for yourself and the enemies. Real well, what can... by the way, these are kind of the semi-good guys. Because... Falcons. Shouldn't be call nodes? I don't know. Because this is kind of like the rebellion against the Hexarchy, and that's why I always help them. More or less, depends on the point of view. Production of weapons. Real World was the best faction, the best Hexarchy, a bit... probably last year, but now it's not that good, because the only thing that is really good at them, because they get the Buffalo backpack. So if you want to barter with them at level 3, get a lot of Buffalo backpacks. Let's consider actually one of the weakest factions, because they don't really have good weapons, and only starting at level 6 do they get specialized weapon. This is just a normal pistol with improved stats. So yeah, they are not really doing that well right now, and it's actually more profitable to fight against them because you have a chance of getting the Buffalo backpack. They also like to use a lot of shotguns, and only at level 7 do they become dangerous when they start wearing their good armor, which is very tough to defeat. These are just normal weapons, so nothing really special about them, except you want a lot of Buffalo backpacks. They're a bit tanky, but they're not really that much harder. I think Dilty is much harder to deal with in the beginning. French Comte Prison Corporation. Think of security guards with just a lot of good armor. They're basically a very tanky faction. They have a lot of weapons that deal a lot of damage. For example, with a light bullet, this deals a lot of damage. Their armor is very good against physical attacks. Pierce, cutting, and even blunt, and some fire. Means they can resist some energy weapons pretty well, so they are kind of tankier, but not a lot of firepower. At level 6 they get a Buffalo as well. And their weapons are not really that impressive, to be honest, compared with some of the stuff the other factions have. At level 10 they get this, which is not that good. Not sure how good these weapons are, but this is probably an assault rifle. This is an SMG which uses heavy bullets. So yeah, very good in the beginning because they are tanky, but later on not so good. Kind of a weird faction because they're mostly defensive ones, sadly. An Unchained Belt, which is the developer's favorite faction right now because they get a lot of cool stuff at any level. So in the beginning they have good barter options. This eats up a lot of ammo, but it's worth it. And as you can see, at every level until level 5 they get weapons, new weapons, and new armors. think this is just an improved makeshift shotgun, another pistol, another SMG, rifle. Super strong as you can see at any level, but you really need to babysit them because they get beaten up by other factions pretty fast. I guess until level 5 they get all of the cool stuff. I'm trying to level them up as well to see all of their cool stuff, and then they just get an armor sniper rifle, an improved one. And at level 10 they have this over here which is using heavy ammo. This is what I want to really see. In the mission I got some of the heavy ammo, which is super heavy ammunition, which has not such a good crit chance, knockback chance. And I'm curious how the guns are. Super heavy ammunition, and I'm curious how they sound. They're basically pirates, by the way. Union of Pirate Crews. SBN is just a media corporation, but it actually has some of the good weapons. It's an energy-focused corporation. You really want to beat up SBN and DLT very early on, otherwise they'll get very strong. So I just did that. So I beat SBN so bad in the beginning that I take level 1. So laser. This is an improved electromagnetic gun, meaning it fires a projectile that deals the same amount of damage each time and doesn't need ammo. They don't have a good armor, that's their only downside, but the energy weapons are super strong, probably the strongest weapons in the game in a way. As you can see, they get progressively better weapons and armor and almost at each level. So they're very hard to beat later on, especially after they get these things, which is a laser sniper rifle, almost impossible when they get it. Then they just get more and more armors, but the armors they're not that good because they protect against different things. So basically this armor is equal to this armor. This is, I think, let's not get into details. The main thing you have to know is that you have to beat them very early on, otherwise later it will be very hard. Same as Sunlight Coven in a way. Let's speak about point 6, which is clones and classes. I'll not waste a lot of time, but basically we'll just do an overview and then you can choose your favorite clone and your favorite class. Francis. The weapons have more durability when he uses them. I'm not sure how it's applied, but basically 120% weapon durability, which means he can use weapons a lot more and he can use basically the worst weapon he finds and use it for a lot longer. His stats are pretty good, but I'll just mainly speak about the main stats. 130 health is good, accuracy 60 is good, dodge chance 15% is good, all around very good stats. Victoria has all the weapons she uses have +2 range, which is a massive amount of extra range in my opinion. She's very strong, but low health, very good accuracy and 15% dodge, but low health, low starvation limit. The range is 9, by the way, that's also pretty important. Basically your dedicated sniper, basically your dedicated scrap or whatever. Percy is my favorite character. Doesn't really have a lot of accuracy, which is his main problem, a lot of ranged accuracy. But his starvation limit is very good, his pain threshold is 18, while the other ones have a lot less. Range is 8, very good and very tanky, but not a lot of accuracy, which is his main problem. 150 health. Isabella is one of those useless characters, ignores infection. Well, it's not that useless right now, because if you get shot in the stomach, you cannot use your antibacterial, your bacteria removals. You cannot cure your infections if you get hit in the stomach or if you don't have the item. But Isabella has 100 health, 50 range accuracy. The only saving grace is that she has 20% dodge chance as opposed to 15, but otherwise very low stats overall. This is probably one of the hardest characters to play with. Basically trash, I don't know why developers made it like that. NZUQ, weight affects dodge. So basically whenever you add weight on your character, it reduces your dodge. So this character not only starts with 25% dodge, he also is not really affected by weight. So basically even with full loot, he still dodges very well. The problem is the 100 health, accuracy being 60 is not really that good, but it's actually pretty good compared to some other characters. So a lot of dodge, range is 7, which is very bad because, think about it, sometimes the enemies will shoot you before you even see them. So the main thing over here is this is the best dodge character build in the game, and with the new augments and implement in implants, you can actually make this much better. So if you have fun, play with this one with a dodge build. Nico, well, the problem with this character is that he doesn't really... Pistols are not really that useful, but if you find a pistol that shoots a lot of bullets, this can be a monster. So if you upgrade a pistol that uses very good ammo, very good with very good stats, you can basically win the game and just play like this with only pistols. Health is decent at 120, accuracy 65 is great, dodge is very bad because it's only 10. So lower dodge with generally lower health is a very bad combination with lower range. But again, the pistol accuracy more or less makes up for it if you shoot your enemies before they see you. I guess now that we have more weapons and you can get some of the endgame pistols, it makes more sense. I'm not sure if it benefits from the backup weapon. I guess if you use 2 pistols, it will be a lot better. Yeah, kind of a thematical build. Definitely a fun build to play, but it has a lot of downsides as well. Not good in the beginning of the game, let me tell you that. Marika adds more fast slots. So basically all of the characters have 1 fast slot. This character will have 3 in the beginning, so I guess that means she will have 5 fast slots, which means she can use a lot of grenades, she can use a lot of stuff. I recommend use throw balls with her, so it's basically a class that throws a lot of stuff at the enemy, but that's not all of the good stuff. More importantly, this is a very good character for accuracy 70, range 9, so she's actually kind of like a sniper, like Victoria. The only problem is that 100 in health, and yeah, that will not really be that good. But she has also a pain threshold limit of 12, which is very good. But the only downside to this character is that the low health and her bonuses need a lot of consumables to be usable. But if you don't want to play with Percy, this will be a very good starting character as well, because of the extra slots and the very good stats, like 9 range as opposed to 8. Pretty good. Mirza, this guy. So she generates 60% calorie. This is kind of like the worst character you can get in a way, because the bonuses are bad. 110 health is very bad. 65 accuracy is not that bad. The other stats are not that bad, but again, this is one of the characters that basically has no specialization. That's why I don't like it. You can basically use running and dodging on this character because of the lower safety drain, but you have to modify the class. You have to modify a class, you have to buff the clone, you have to get specific... I don't know. It's just too much work to make this class work, because I saw it what the point is. This is basically an endgame class where you can just run all over the place, where you don't need to loot as much and just kill everyone. It works in a way, but you can also just use Kenzie for that, because you'll have a lot more dodge. So this is a very niche thing. I think the developers will have to rebalance it at some point. Maximilian feels no pain. Almost useless in the end game, because the weapons right now will kill you so fast that pain is no longer an issue. 120 health. Kind of annoying, because you should have 150 health if you have infinite pain threshold. Accuracy is pretty good, but he also, this guy doesn't have any dodge. Even the other characters have at least 10% or 15% range 8. So this is again one of those characters that you probably want to play if you want to challenge yourself, since it has no synergy and it's basically useless stuff. You know, yeah, not really anything good to say about this. This is definitely one of the weakest characters in the game. Oberon Lucas, 120 health is decent, accuracy is bad, dodge is bad. And he only gets 1 extra weapon slot. I think he can go up to 4 weapons with a servo backpack, but again, there's no real reason to play with this clone, because the weapon slot is not that good. Well, I guess you can say in the beginning when you have an extra weapon to loot, but not even that. The main problem with this guy is that he just doesn't have anything good, and he has only 5 dodge, plus his accuracy is only 60, which, I mean, is not as bad as Percy, which has 55, but still not really a reason to use it unless you want to use a lot of weapons, a lot of very specialized weapons. So for example, if you want to use a laser to destroy a wall, shotgun to kill enemies, and a sniper rifle to eliminate the dangerous ones, yes, it might work, but I don't know, if you have a buffalo backpack and 3 weapons, Technically this would be very good, but it's not very good in the beginning, so this is another type of character that could be useful much later into the game, but with that low accuracy, not really. Would have to buff the accuracy. Now this is another character that is a bit of a mismatch. This is what you'd call weird. So you have a very low accuracy, but you have reload duration -2 action points. So this is a waste of time. As your accuracy is so low, you'll not hit a lot of enemies. This would have been great to certain builds, but overall I feel like this is another niche build that is only useful in the end game. So yeah, as you can see, the best classes overall will be Percy, in my opinion, Victoria, Yukio because of the dodge, and the other one, I guess it depends on what you like and who you like, and Mirza probably. Yeah, so those are the 4 ones. Now the classes. The classes are a bit of a thing that is a little harder to explain, so we'll just go over their skills so you can choose or wait for the best ones. Basically, you want to choose a class like the Tunnel Rats. I guess it's easier if I explain the Tunnel Rats first. So, you do more damage with shotgun ammo, which means if you use a shotgun that doesn't use shotgun ammo, you don't get a bonus, which means a poison shotgun will not get bonuses, or at least this is how it was explained and I always understood it. So basically only normal shotgun ammo, nothing too particular, but you deal more damage with a weapon, you get more loot somehow, you have increased defensive capabilities, you also stabilize all of the wounds, which this is a bit of a useless skill in my opinion. Stabilizing just means bandaged, and you can use a dirty bandage to bandage it and it's stabilized, doesn't mean it will heal. And caution. Revealing a hidden enemy will activate the trigger. It's sometimes good because of the crit chance. I like it, but it's not really that useful, and also this one, shelters. Attacking from cover has more accuracy, which can be amazing, but it only activates if an enemy misses an attack on you. So yeah, this is the best class because of the looting capabilities, the defensive bonuses, the increased damage. And the activations are not that bad because you have increased damage or increased accuracy. So yeah, that will be the basis for judging the other classes. Scouts of Hades is not that bad because in the beginning you get more resistance, but it's a percentage based one. So let me look at it like this. So this is the clone perk over here. More resistance is very good because it's a defensive thing. More accuracy is very good as well. Less scatter is good, but it ties with the accuracy as well. So combining these two things is not as useful as you might think. This trigger over here is kind of bad because you need to take damage or you need to get hit to get it. More health is also very good because it's a defensive option, and then the dodge. Another trigger one. This is basically a very good class, but it's defensive, doesn't have a lot of damage, and it's basically designed to... It's designed for the long game, to be on the slower side, which is something I don't really like, but I guess it's passable. The Eclipse Blades... This is a melee class, which people will not really use in the beginning, because you get extra accuracy and then you get a lot of dodge. So yeah, this is why I keep saying that certain dodge builds will be... I guess dodge builds are the best in the game, since if an enemy cannot hit you, you cannot die. So dodge is 1,000,000% better than resistance, because resistance means you'll take the damage, you'll take the wound, you'll take the effect, while dodge basically denies everything. And then over here you'll get melee damage, and you just have to eat human meat to activate some melee damage. And then all damage is increased by 50%, which means you can even use a gun or some other things. Then you just have a regeneration. If you start bleeding, you start healing faster. So very good melee build for the beginning of the game. Not much to say about it. Very good with characters that can dodge a lot. Makes the game in a way very easy, but at the same time you need to know how to play a melee character, because you'll still get hit sometimes. 50 Zealot. So this is another one that is good because it has pain immunity, which is good. Grenade damage. So this is damage from the grenades you throw, but also from the grenade launcher. So if you can produce a lot of grenades, this will be amazing and very fun to play. You see a room full of enemies, you just start throwing grenades or using the grenade launcher. Very, very good because it has, again, it has increased damage with the weapon. Scatter, which might be good, might be bad. You'll have to use these specific weapons, sadly. Now, the problem with this is that if you're using a grenade launcher and if you're using a big weapon, you not really need any accuracy or less scatter. Deployable health and damage, which is great because the turrets are good. So once you start producing turrets, you can put a turret down and then throw a grenade and just have a lot of fun. But this is a very, very resource intensive build. This incoming damage minus 5%, which is very, very useful because this is total damage decrease. So I think it means the damage is decreased by the armor and then the damage you receive is decreased by this. I'm not sure how it works, but you just receive less damage. Firing the last round will activate this. So a big heavy gun with increased accuracy will be very, very useful. Basically a very consumable heavy build, very fun in the end game and the late game, but not very useful in the beginning of the game, especially because most of this will not be useful. Don't really recommend it. Hanorats is the best class. Phoenix Brigade. This is another good one because battery damage is increased by 10%, which means you deal more damage with energy weapons, and as you saw, there are a lot of energy weapons in the game. Burn just 10%, which is very, very good because if you hit an enemy with increased damage and you have a high chance of causing burn. I think this is way too good in this iteration of the game. You also have this one over here because it increased the fire duration by 1 and burning time. Fire duration means the fire will last longer on the ground. Burning duration means an enemy will burn for extra rounds. What this means is if you see a room with, let's say, 5 enemies, you shoot a burst of energy weapons, they'll catch on fire, the ground will catch on fire, and they'll also burn for a longer time, and fire will, I don't know, it's just a mess. It kills so many enemies so fast, so good. And this is where the game becomes a little more interesting. Elemental resist. So most of the weapons that will kill the player are elemental in nature. So I guess if you get hit, the damage will be reduced by at the same time. I'm not sure if this reduces the damage you get to trigger it. A weapon activates the trigger. This is another weird one. This is probably one you will replace because throw duration is never a problem. And regeneration also bad one. So we have a lot of good things over here for energy guns, and this is just kind of meh with 3 triggers instead of 2. So this class is very good if you can replace some of these things on the right over here. If you replace Marauder with one of these things and you have, oh boy, such a high amount of damage. Spaceborne Ghost. This is another one of the classes that is more designed for dodging. So this is useless. If you dodge, you don't really need this. That's the 2 dodge perks. This hit in stealth mode activates the trigger, meaning you get an increased crit chance. You fire from stealth mode. Specialty restores more health, and then you just have this one over here, killing an enemy. Stuns the next. I'm not sure how this works, but I guess it just stuns an enemy more or less. This is another one of those classes that is meant for the late game because it doesn't have anything to help you with looting or with damage. That's very good defensive options over here, and this is a little bit of a niche thing, but you do benefit from this. But again, it has a cooldown, so it's not that good. So if you can replace these things over here, probably be a much better melee class in my opinion, if you can replace one of these with the melee damage or melee accuracy. Angel of Spades is also one of the cool ones. Skipping a turn in stealth mode will increase your range critical chance by 25%, but it's a trigger, not a passive one, so you can have a big shot, but usually the enemies hang out in big parties, so it's not that good. Amputation chance 10% is very, very good, but again, it's a trigger. The first shot with the full magazine activates the trigger, range, crit chance, and accuracy. This would be very, very good. Kind of kill a lot of enemies when it's paired with this one. More accuracy, armor penetration, which is quite unique because it means you ignore armor penetration. So if an enemy has 50% resistance, you probably ignore, I would say, 5% of it and not 10% of it. Again, Not sure the math, but you basically can kill enemies much easier with this and the bleed damage. This is a bit of a bigger discussion because it slows the game so much that you don't really want to play with it. So yeah, I guess it's goodie for the end game, but in the beginning of the game this will just slow you too much. Terror pack. Oh, this is one of the most unique ones in the game currently. It's very fun to play with, but very hard and annoying. When you have a lot of pain, you get regeneration. When you're eating VAC, you have a chance to convert enemies, which is a bit of a weird thing. So because you need a lot of VAC, what does this do? You have a chance of converting an enemy to your side, and I think the enemy will stay on your side until you leave the level or until it dies. It can be very, very good. Pack cooldown and pack also, you use packs more often, but it depends if you have a good pact or not. More melee damage, obviously. Each QuasiMorph is effect 20%. So this requires a bit of an explanation. So you know how the QuasiMorphosis level basically gives the enemy something. So you'll see that the bonuses are something like more health, more damage, more resistance. That means you get 20% of the current QuasiMorph bonus for the enemies, which can be very good. And then you have this one over here, which works with the blade, axe, or chainsaw. The basic perk. So this is a melee class that uses some very, very cool features, but doesn't have anything for defense. So if you can use your pacts and your buffs to do a lot of damage in melee, but you don't have much in terms of defense, yeah, it's going to be a very tough one to play with. I guess most people will replace this with some form of dodge or something. Valkyria Squad is the last one. The piercing chance is very, very good and fun, but it only works with SMGs. Or I guess with SMGs you can only... Again, the developer should explain most of these things. With an SMG you can level it up. Seems like this would work with any gun though. I guess it's easy to test. This is a very, very good one, first aid, because it has an increased chance of healing the wound, which is very, very good. Shock effect. Shock weapons deal 20% more damage. So I guess this is to the weapon damage and to the shock effect as well. There are quite a lot of shock weapons in the game currently, so that will be very useful now. Satiety drain, less satiety drain, meh, not so good. Range crit chance if you skip a turn in stealth can be good in a way. Then you also have a dodge chance, which is another trigger. So these ones are very hard to use, but you get extra damage, you get a defensive option, and you can also heal your wounds faster. Makes this a very good one. So, what are the best classes? Well, of course I would advocate for Tunnel Rats. Scouts of Hades are just good because of how easy they are to access. The Angels of Spade are also pretty nice, but I think it's something like Tunnel Rats. Then you have the Phoenix Brigade just because of the damage. The extra damage with energy weapons is so massive, I like it a lot. And then you just have the Valkyria Squad because of how easy it is to heal. And this is one of the problems of the game. If you can have good armor and just heal the injuries almost naturally, you don't need much else. Terror Pack and some of the other ones are a little bit too niche for my taste, especially if you have to use a lot of resources. So yeah, that's kind of like an overview of the clones and the classes. Now let's speak about the medical system. The medical system has been updated in a very annoying way. I'll just show you, I guess I can show you with the augmentation over here. So if you get an injury, you need to repair it with what? Actually, let's go over here to the conveyor. You need to fix a wound with certain things. So the rag has a very, very small chance of healing a certain wound, but it will stabilize it. So a stabilized wound means it doesn't produce the negative effects on you. Most of them, at least. So this is only good for healing cut wounds and pierce wounds, but if you have a deep wound or if you have a shock wound, it will not heal it. So you need a specialized one. Plus, as you can see, if you want to heal a cut wound, it only has a 25% chance. So after it's done stabilizing, it will actually try and fix it. If it fails, then the wound opens up again. So that means basically you will only have to use bandages or splints, since no longer can use the rags to such a great effect. But this is where things get very tricky. So for example, if you get a burn or a deep burn, you will have to use the medical glue or another item to have a better chance of healing it. But that doesn't mean you'll heal it all the time, it just means you have an increased chance. So for example, you might add, let's say, 4 bandages and you fail to cure the wound, and then let's say you had the medical glue, 70% chance to cure it. Or depends on the wound type, I guess. You also stabilize it, and you still don't heal it, so that means you'll have to try until you heal it. But after a while, the wounds will have the self-healing attribute, so that means even if you fail to heal a wound 5 times with a rag, it will still close after a certain amount of time, depending on the intensity. I guess wounds have 3 intensities, superficial, medium, or how should I put it? A grave wound and a deadly wound. Yeah, I guess that's... We have superficial wounds, grave wounds, and deadly wounds. The deadly wounds will never heal unless you have the appropriate fix, which might be a bandage, glue, or something else. And you can also heal them with a doctor. This is where things get tricky. So for example, if you have a fracture and you try to heal it with a rag, as you can see, this doesn't have anything for fracture, so that means it will have the basic chance of 5%. So sometimes you might even try about, I don't know, 6 times to heal a fracture with the rag. It might not work until it gets the self-healing, because it's only 5% chance to heal it. So when it gets the self-healing, it will close on itself, but you get the idea. Some wounds will be so specific that you'll need the specific bandage. So if you get a chemical burn or a radiation wound, you'll need a hydrogel bandage, which will be very hard to obtain a bit later, and you can also craft them. As you can see, you only need the rag and the water, so that means you need to collect all of the water you find. But things like the osteojoint are super hard to make with acid and ribs, so basically you'll have to barter for a lot of the medicine, and that's not all, they'll also have the effects. Let me see if I have any alcohol. So this will heal radiation sickness. So that means if you get hit by a weapon that does radiation damage, a beam weapon, you'll get an effect called radiation, and you might also get a wound called something radiation. So that means you need to reduce the radiation with vodka or another item, or that means you need to use a specific bandage or a specific cure to heal the wound itself, plus the stabilization. Then you also will need an item to heal yourself, because you lose health in most of the cases. So yeah, that's how absurd the system has become right now, and I think a lot of people will not enjoy it. Because you have a very small chance of healing with rags, and even if you use a bandage or a splint, if it's not the wound type mentioned over here, it will not heal. And even if it's a fracture, for example, it will only have a 70% chance. So yeah, at some point you just have to stock up on all of the medicine you can get and only take this into combat. It's going to be a very hard thing to understand, plus all of the effects that cannot really be healed, plus the pain, which if you get too much pain, that means you'll get stunned. That's how the current medical system works, like it or hate it, it is what it is. Ship storage. I guess for this I'll just show you my ship storage so you can understand a little better. The first number over here is just weapons I intend to use on missions, ammo, food, sorbents, other additional items that help me. On number 2 I just have armors and backpacks and vests. I have quite a bit of them, as you can see. But here's just basic manufacturing items, so basic components. But here I have very advanced components that I use to upgrade my ship or just to barter. This is to produce stuff, this is to barter and upgrade the ship. Over here I just have a lot of repair kits, because the repair kits will be also used in ship upgrades and some other stuff. And also here I'll keep my specialized ammo types. Over here I'll just keep my exotic weapons. As you can see, I have quite a bit of them right now. The damage is 1 to 40, but this is what the game doesn't tell you. The painful crits modifier means if you crit, you have a 30% damage increase, 300% damage increase. So that means if you deal 40 damage and you crit, it will actually become 120 damage, which means at that point nobody can really survive because you fire 3 times or 5 times. So if you fire 5 times and hit the maximum damage of 200, that means you'll deal 600 damage, and I'm not even joking. That's the way it works, which is super silly in my opinion, but hey. So even if you don't hit a high damage roll, or if you get shot by, let's say, 20 damage with 5 shots, that's 100. Multiplied at 300, so yeah. That's going to be a lot of extra damage. That's going to be 300 damage. So this is a bit of a weird thing, because you're not counting in the wounds. So if you get hit, let's say, by a crit, not only do you get the effect of the weapon and the wound, you get an additive effect. So you have the damage from the shot, you have the effect, which might be lower accuracy or something. You can get multiple wounds on a single, let's say, body point, which basically will kill you, and this is the big problem. And as you can see, this is some of the rare stuff. Also, you'll have to look at the guns and maybe sort them in a different way, because you might also want to sort silenced weapons with non-silenced weapons, energy weapons, and so on. So probably you'll end up using this as well. Depends on your weapons. And here I just will use implants and augments. This will be very hard to explain, and this is kind of like my strategy to sort all of this stuff out. Now let's go to point number 9, chip unlock and crafting. And this is another weird thing, because I'm not sure how you're supposed to get all of these chips, so I don't recommend you craft anything in the beginning of the game except sorbents. Just craft a ton of it. By a ton I mean a few hundreds. And then you should just craft the morphine with glass and poppy straws to sell, and I mean to barter with at stations. And then I don't really recommend you craft the bandages and the splints too often, only a few times, because you want to keep all of your resources for the more important things, sadly. Like some of the repair kits, like some of the weapons and armor. So as you can see, you know, it might not seem like a lot, but as soon as you unlock something, you probably want to produce it. You might think, well, I will never die and not have anything, right? And you'll actually die a lot of times and you'll be left without anything. So try to produce a lot of the hydrogels, which means you have to get every piece of water you can get in the game. Always skip it, even if it's toilet water. Always try to craft some of the repair kits if you can, because some of them will be used to upgrade the ship. So just if you need to craft something, just craft it. And when you unlock something really good... Oh yeah, over here, like the Kevlar medical boots. This will kind of become your staple. So you need to get the rusty metal armor plates, plastic, capacitor, and glass. Because this, for example, has good resistance against beam and pierce. So if you die against an enemy that uses a beam weapon and you are left without anything, you should probably craft a few of these items that are the best, so you can, you know, at least survive a little longer when you're fighting against them. But more importantly, you'll need the gunsmith kits to repair some of your more exotic weapons, because this will fix your firearms, but not all of them. So you'll need specific kits, but the game gets crazy, to repair, let's say, the tools, the energy weapons, the electromagnetic weapons, and the laser weapons. So as you can see, everything is tiered right now. Or yeah, you know, when the gunsmith kits repair the weapon, not anymore. Basically, you have kinetic weapons, tools. Some of the things will be considered tools, and then the energy, laser, and electromagnetic. Also, don't craft things like the PMC ration, even though it has more uses. Yeah, it has more uses, and that's why it doesn't seem like it's worth it, but sometimes you will not really take the items with you anyway. You kind of have to learn the flow of the game right now. Look at this. So to craft antibiotic, you need plastic and rotten meat. I think you just have to hold meat in your ship bay for a long time, and then it becomes rotten meat. Plastic and rotten meat for antibiotics, and then... oh boy, you'd have to craft all of those things for the first aid kit. So that's why I said you don't want to craft and use the splints and the bandages. You probably want to craft them, to use them to craft first aid kits for later. So it's a bit of a mess. I don't know how else to explain it. Then you probably want to craft some medical glue. So yeah, use this and this to craft antibiotics, to craft the first aid kits, or to craft the medical glue. This medical glue fixes most of the issues, plus it adds regenerations. Also reduces the pain, so yeah, you'll have to craft the higher end stuff anyway for the medicine when you can. When you feel comfortable with the character and a build, try to craft the high end tier stuff, and then maybe you can take some bandages with you, but if you have the first aid kit and medical glue, then you'll probably be okay. And more importantly, only use them if necessary. So you'll only use the medical glue if you get a deep wound. Doesn't even heal the deep wounds. Huh. If you have something that has the self-healing or it doesn't have such a bad effect, you probably want to bandage it with the rags anyway. So you will only want to use this in the case of very, very heavy wounds. Like for example the deep burns or the electrical wounds maybe. Depends on the wood type. So you don't want to use basically expensive stuff to heal cheap stuff. Now let's go to the last part of the video, which will be the augmented stuff. Augments and implants. So you can see you have a special part over here. Now this is going to be one of those, again, most of the topics I explain will take a lot of time to really detail. So let's say like this. So right now you have enemies that can be augmented with some things that you don't have access to. There are 3 types of cyborgs right now. There will be the cyborg metal one, which can be just a lowly miner or whatever, a digger. There will be the other lowly cyborg, which will be a rubberized one, which is kind of like the recreational AR or something like that. Some of the other ones have metal ones, rubber ones. These are the basic ones. These are the rubber ones, which are actually useful. And then you have the military versions. So basically you replace, let's say, an arm. You replace the arm with this one. And you might think, well, what's the deal? What is the catch? What is the benefit? And then the arm will also have the manipulator or the hand or whatever. Well, if you look at just the manipulator, you'll not see a lot of benefits because you lose health and ranged accuracy, right? Right, but you get an implant socket. You can also just use implants as they are, but I don't recommend you do that. Also, if you put, let's say, a cyborg leg and the leg gets damaged, you have to repair it with repair kits or just random nonsense. So this is why, as you can see, it says repairs electromagnetic weapons, but stabilizes the wound, only if it's a cyborg part. And it's a much deeper system and I don't have enough time to explain that over here. So this might look pretty bad because you might think, well, what's the point of doing this? Well, the point of doing this is to get, let's say, 10% accuracy with the leg. Then you have a wound healing chance of 15 extra %, but you have lower max health and lower resistance. That's a frame, by the way. Well, the idea is to also replace more things and then add implants over it. The cyborg the military manipulator, as you can see, has an extra projectile per shot, but it has an extra wounding chance. So that means you probably want something that decreases the wounding chance. It also has, let's say, 2 implant sockets, so as you can see, the more advanced stuff will have 2 sockets. So usually you have only 1. The foot is 1, cyborg leg is 2, this is also 2. So you'll have 10% extra dodge while you have the weight modifier, so weight will be 10% more taxing on you, so you have 10% more weight, but you can also not use stealth. With this one you cannot use run, but it also decreases your dodge. So let's say you use some of this stuff to get the extra dodge, and then use some of this stuff to get the extra projectile. And then you kind of fix your problems with stuff like this. The head will also give you 1 more weapon range, 1 more vision range, 20% extra crit damage, which is massive, but it reduces your field of view. And then you also add the controller, which means you'll have a crit chance increased, ranged accuracy as well. So sadly, to use most of this stuff, basically you'll have to use more augments and then add the appropriate implants. I don't have a lot of them, but you can see some of them over here. Fire, poison, beam resist, which will be massive. And then you can kind of pair it with this implant over here. You do have a bigger chance of getting wounded, but you heal every turn, 5 HP per turn, which can be massive. Doesn't really say if it affects wounds, but then you can also get this one for shocks. This is another shoulder implant. I really wish it would be a little more clear on where you can put it. So the leg will have that and that. You can also decrease the reload chance. I guess it's a little harder to explain because I don't have all of the cyborg or all the augments and implants to show you, but you kind of get the idea. These are the interesting ones. The bio monitor. I think this will let you scan the surrounding area for enemies. Just like so, even if it says you cannot use stealth, you'll be able to use the bio monitor. Again, I'm not sure if this is the way it works to check for enemies. So at some point you're basically replacing everything. So let's say you have the military head with one vision and one weapon range. Then you just add to that the critical damage and the critical chance from the head, the Cortex Simulator, the head implant, and then you also have the bonuses from the controller. So as you can see, you can go really crazy with some of these builds with the crits and the other stuff with the dodges and the other stuff. Plus the perk XP mode, which means I think this is just 80% more experience for your perks. Let me show you what the perks are, because it's actually pretty easy to forget. The stuff you activate with training over here, the perk. I'm not sure how that works, but I think this is what it means. So, the implants will be a major aspect of the game from now on, but I'm not sure if it will be that useful in the beginning of the game. So that's why I'm trying to play the game more, to have more information about the game itself. So, and this is basically covering all of the major aspects of the game, except for, you know, the actual gameplay and some of the other stuff, like the finer points. But don't worry, I'll make more videos for the other stuff as well. Bye bye.